Welcome to my channel. I'm Kenya. I make content on books and media, and occasionally I'll make a little vlog here and there. But yeah, if you're interested in books or media, please consider hitting that subscribe button down below. I'd really appreciate it. I'm trying to grow my channel within the next year. I have a long way to go, but if you stumbled upon this video and you like the vibes, please consider joining the channel, and thank you for being here. This video is quite simple. I'm just going to be going through all of the books that I read this summer and giving a quick synopsis and review. I hope that this will inspire more people to read, or inspire you to read something maybe a little bit different than what you normally do. I have really been trying to get into reading this past year. I wasn't a big reader for a long time, and it really wasn't until this year that I really started reading consistently. Prior to this year, I might have read maybe 3 or 4 books a year, and now I'm trying to read 3 or 4 books a month. And maybe I'll make another video on like my relationship with reading, but I really realized that kind of school ruined my relationship with reading, and I kind of associated reading with grades and academia in a way that made me really resent it. And like I said, I'll probably make another video where I'll go deeper into that. But being in a class in college where you kind of just read contemporary fiction to talk about them, and it was kind of more of like a book club and less like a class, was actually really fun, and it brought back a passion for reading that I didn't have before. And ever since I took that class last spring, I really have just been reading a lot more, but I never know what to read. So I always like go on YouTube or TikTok to see what other people are reading, what other people are talking about. And that's kind of what inspired this video. Maybe I can make a video that will help somebody else kickstart their reading journey, or get out of their reading slump, or read a really good book. Now, granted, all of the books that I read this summer, I did not have a good experience reading all of them. There were a couple, as you will see, that did put me in a reading slump, but just having community online to discuss what is out there and what is good and worth your time and money, and what might not be worth your time and money, was just very beneficial for me this summer while I was trying to revitalize my reading. Yeah, that's kind of the inspiration for this video, and I just hope that it helps someone out there find their next book. The first book that I'm going to talk about is actually one of the last books that I read this summer. I read this within the last 3 weeks of August. This has been a book that I have wanted to read for a while. It's one of those ones that I hear about and I'm just like, oh, that seems so interesting, but I actually never go out of my way to read it, because I wasn't going out of my way to read at all. Once I rekindled my love for reading this summer, I decided, okay, I'm gonna read this book. And I'm so glad that I did. Girl on the Train is a thrilling story told from the perspective of 3 different women. One of them is an alcoholic, one of them is a cheater, one of them is a stalker, one of them is a mother, and one of them goes missing. The story is mainly told from the perspective of our protagonist, Rachel, who is an unreliable narrator, to say the least. Rachel rides the train every day to and from work. On that train ride, she looks through the window and sees this other young lady who we learn is Megan through the window. She stalks her. She comes up with crazy ideas about what her life is like, which is far from the truth. She believes Megan to have the perfect life. She's like the perfect white blonde girl who doesn't have any problems in the world. She lives in this nice house. She doesn't seem to ever have to worry about anything. And then one day, Megan goes missing. Nobody knows what happens to her. It's a mystery. Nobody knows if she's dead, if someone took her, if she's alive somewhere, if she ran away. It's a complete mystery, and Rachel takes it upon herself to solve the mystery of the missing Megan. And she kind of spirals while she does this. All of the questions to Megan's disappearance are slowly uncovered over the course of the story, and it is a journey full of twists and turns. Girl on the Train is a page-turning thriller to add to your TBR list. If you like mysteries or thrillers, this is a cult classic and, dare I say, a must-read. It is a story full of unexpected turns. The author really leaves you with a twist in every chapter. Like, my jaw was hanging after reading almost every chapter of this book. I was like, what's gonna happen next? What is Rachel gonna do next? How is she gonna spiral even further? I really enjoy Rachel, even though she is problematic and an unreliable narrator. She is also somehow at the same time very charming, and you just feel sympathetic towards her. But overall, I give this book a 4.5 because it was a very enjoyable summer read. I highly recommend reading this book on like a long trip. If you're taking a road trip or if you have a long flight, I highly recommend reading this book. It just hits different when you are on some form of public transportation, because I feel like we all do that thing where we make up stories about the strangers that we are sitting next to on the train or on the plane in our minds. Maybe I'm crazy, but I know I do it, and I think this book really captures that feeling perfectly. I can't give it 5 stars because some portions of this book really drags, in my opinion. The author is extremely detailed, and sometimes she's detailed to a fault, to the point where she gives you too many details and you're just reading some of the pages like questioning why you're reading this, or why this was included in the book, or why this wasn't cut. Also, with that being said, I don't want to spoil too much more of the book, but I think that there was a couple subplots in the book that were unnecessary. My favorite quote from Girl on the Train is on page 55. My favorite quote is from Megan, one of the narrators of the book, and she says, "Sometimes I don't want to go anywhere. I think I'll be happy if I never have to set foot outside the house again. I don't even miss working. I just want to remain safe and warm in my haven with Scott, undisturbed. It helps that it's dark and cold and that the weather is filthy. It helps that it hasn't stopped raining for weeks. Freezing, driving, bitter rain, accompanied by gales howling through the trees. So loud they drown out the sound of the train. I can't hear it on the tracks, enticing me, tempting me to journey elsewhere." 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. It is a smart, sexy, unexpectedly funny contemporary love story that follows a single mother, Eva Mercy, as she reconnects with her high school sweetheart, Shane Hall, at a Black literary convention. Eva and Shane are both authors, and they have spent the last couple of years writing to each other and about each other through their books, and they're able to confront each other at this convention and rekindle their romance together. This book is very well written, it's witty, it's funny, and it was an exciting summer read. I read it in a week, I couldn't put it down. The highlight that this book has on Eva's relationship with her daughter is so amazing. The author captures both sides of this mother-daughter relationship so fully and in such an eloquent and authentic way. I think it's something that all mothers and all daughters will be able to relate to and see themselves in. I also definitely want to praise this book for the way it depicts Black characters. The author goes out of her way to depict Eva and Shane as two very intelligent, smart, successful authors. I think that that is very important because, you know, all of the negative stereotypes that the media tries to push out there, this book actively rejects. And I think that it needs to be praised for doing that because it is rarer than it should be in the year 2023. The only thing that is keeping me from giving this book 5 stars, and it might sound a little foolish, but it's the sex scenes. I think that there are too many sex scenes in this book. I know that it's a romance novel, so sex scenes kind of come with the territory, but these sex scenes were very cringy, and I think that there were just one too many. I think 3 max is my three sex scenes is my max. That is the limit that I have. Did have too many sex scenes for me that were a bit cringy. Also, I think that the book was a little bit predictable because she does have Ava and Shane follow the enemies to lovers trope, which I'm not really a huge fan of that trope in general. I think it is rarely done well. And I think she does do it well in this book, but it kind of makes the ending very predictable because you're kind of like, okay, well, I know how this is already going to end midway through, or at least that's how I felt when I was reading it. But other than those things, I really highly recommend this book, especially if you enjoy romance novels. I think you have to read this book. It's so well written, it's so funny, and I think it's just a great summer read. The last 2 books I really enjoyed. I read one at the end of the summer and I read one at the beginning of the summer, and it was the perfect way to kind of start and bookend my summer reading. And then there was Such a Fun Age, which I read in the middle of July, and I'm not gonna lie, it put me in a bit of a reading slump. And I know that's gonna confuse a lot of people, maybe make a couple of people mad, but I have a lot to say about it. But first, let me tell you what it's about. So, Such a Fun Age is a coming of age story about a 25-year-old African-American female named Amira who babysits for this very rich white woman named Alix Chamberlain. And while Amira was babysitting Alix's 3-year-old, she gets wrongly accused of trying to kidnap that 3-year-old in a grocery store. And all of this gets filmed and put on the internet. Experiencing this public act of racism and the events that follow after forces Amira to reevaluate her relationship with her employer, Alix, and really just reevaluate her life as a 25-year-old. So reading this book put me in a bit of a reading slump because the pacing was so slow. I think this book also suffered from being too detailed, like I talked about with The Girl on the Train, but The Girl on the Train is able to get away with those details because the story is entertaining and, you know, compelling, and the characters are messed up but charming. But in this book, it's overly detailed, drags, and the plot is confusing, and none of the characters are likable except for maybe the main character. And even she frustrated me because I felt like she just, the entire book, she was sulking, playing the victim, and had no self-esteem, which is great for like the first chapter, but eventually she needed to like grow out of that, and she never did. And that was my problem with her. But other than that, she's very charming. She's a clumsy 25-year-old who is trying to figure out how to get health insurance, which is very relatable. But the other characters surrounding her were also equally as bad as her, if not worse. Specifically her friends, which was very disappointing because all of her friends are women of color. And I was like, oh, this is great. Maybe since this is written by a Black woman, we'll get women of color characters that are strong and complex and multidimensional. But instead, we get characters that are shallow and flat, and you question why Amira keeps them as friends, because all they do is sort of bully her and make her feel ashamed of her career as a babysitter, even though it's something that she really enjoys. She finds babysitting this 3-year-old girl very fulfilling, but because she doesn't have a nice apartment or make as much money as them, they kind of shame her for it, which is extremely shallow in my opinion, and really frustrating because I was expecting more. And I think in general, I was expecting more from this book, and it really taught me to go into a book with no expectations. This book is talked about a lot on BookTube and Book Talk. It's in Reese's book club. So I went into it with the expectation that it was going to be my next 5-star read. It was going to be the next Toni Morrison. When it wasn't that, I immediately disliked it. Yeah, so it really taught me the lesson that I just should not go into a book with expectations. It does highlight important themes, and I think it does highlight those important themes very well. I think just the plot and the characters kind of destroys all of the thematic work that she does because it makes the book hard to read. So yeah, that's my opinions on Such a Fun Age. I know that there are going to be people out there that have different opinions, and that is okay. If you enjoyed the book, good for you. I think that there are a lot of good qualities about this book. It just wasn't for me. On a much more positive note, the next book that I'm going to be talking about is The Vanishing Half. I loved this book. I loved every second of reading this book. It is a story about colorism, specifically within the Black community. That's a hard topic to tackle, but this book does it in such a nuanced way, and it's such a thoughtful depiction of the act of passing. So the story follows a pair of two very light-toned twins, Desiree and Stella, as they run away from Mallard, the small African-American town in the dirty South that they were raised in the late 1960s. Once they both successfully escape Mallard, they split up and live very different lives. Desiree falls in love with a dark-skinned man and has a dark-skinned daughter, while Stella lives her life passing as a white woman, marries a white man, and has a white passing daughter. Throughout the book, we get to see how their separate lives diverge and collide throughout the years, as one sister stays true to who she is and the other is constantly running away from her identity. This book is brilliant. A contemporary classic. I read this book in one sitting in 3 hours because I couldn't turn away from it. I couldn't put it down. I didn't want to eat. I just wanted to read this story. It was so captivating and impactful. It's well written, it has a strong message, it talks about strong themes of sisterhood, colorism, identity. It's one of my new favorites. It gets a 5 stars from me. So my favorite quote from The Vanishing Half is on page 118. As you can see, I have a lot of favorite quotes, but I ended up choosing this one because I think it just captures the message of the story so well. The writing in this book is so good though. I think that there is honestly a memorable quote on almost every page of this book. But on page 118, the author writes, "She'd always known that it was possible to be two different people in one lifetime. Or maybe it was only possible for some. Maybe others were just stuck with who they were. She tried to lighten her skin once during her first summer in Mallard. She was still young enough then to believe that such a thing was possible, yet old enough to understand that it would require a degree of alchemy that she didn't quite understand. Magic. She wasn't foolish enough to hope that someday she might be light, but a deep brown maybe? Anything is better than this endless black." I can't even put into words what that book means to me. I think HBO just picked this up recently for a limited series as well, so that's exciting. Maybe I'll do a book versus TV show. I think that it's exciting. I have high hopes for it, but I'm also skeptical about it because the book is so good. I just don't know if they're going to be able to turn it into a TV show. But also, the author is so visual with her writing. Hopefully, the creators of the show are able to incorporate that into the TV show. The next book that I'm going to be talking about is Assembly by Natasha Brown. It's very short, only 100 pages, and very impactful, very interesting. Assembly is a short book narrated by a Black British woman. She is the daughter of immigrants, a girlfriend, a successful employee, but she has no age, no name, and no preferences, and that's a very important aspect of this book. The author intentionally does not give you any other information about the main character. Almost like her name, her identity is insignificant because her experience is universal for all Black British women, which I think was very intentional and very important. It almost feels like she is a ghost floating out of her own body to describe her struggles with assimilating to this European culture. By the end of the book, she chooses to reject assimilation and ascends into a life where she has more agency. It's beautiful. I never read something that was able to depict what it's like having an existential crisis so well. It's a quick read. It has important themes, an important message. It's very engaging. At some points, it can be kind of overly intellectual and overly dense with its vocabulary when it's not necessary. And I think the author wanted it to read more like poetry, but for that reason, I can't give it 5-star ratings because I did think it was kind of a little too overly intellectual. So I did give this read 4 stars. However, I still highly recommend it. It's definitely worth the short amount of time it takes to read it. My favorite quote from this book is on page 52. The narrator says, "I understand what this weekend means. Pulling back the curtain. He's inviting me to the chambers beyond. It's not acceptance, not yet. It's just a step further, closer. I must learn to navigate it. Through him and Rachel, I study their cultural capital. I learn what I'm meant to do, how I'm meant to live, what I'm supposed to enjoy. I watch, I emulate. It takes practice and an understanding of what's out of reach, what I can't pull off. Born here, parents born here, always lived here, still never from here. Their culture becomes parody on my body. For context, the man she is referencing in that quote is her white boyfriend, and Rachel is her white best friend. And so in that quote, she's talking about studying how they move in the world and trying to assimilate to this European culture by copying her white friends. It's very impactful. Like I said, it can be a little too intellectual, but other than that, I really highly recommend Assembly. The last book that I'm going to be talking about for this video is Bones and All by Camila De Angelis. I read this book after I saw the 2022 film adaptation, so I did it backwards. I saw the movie, then I read the book. I think I'm going to do a book versus movie video on this book because the book is quite different from its movie adaptation, but I really enjoyed reading this book. It was a page turner. It was exciting. This book is a haunting coming-of-age thriller about a 16-year-old girl, Marin, coming into her own despite being abandoned by her mother with only a little cash, her birth certificate, and a book bag. Marin's mother leaves her because she has grown tired of having to live a life on the run due to Marin's cannibalism. After Marin gets abandoned by her mother, she goes on a road trip to meet her father, who is also a cannibalist, for the first time. On this journey, she meets other cannibalists who are called eaters and learns to accept herself. It's twisted, it's messed up, it's gory. The way she tells the story through Marin, who is an unreliable narrator, is so entertaining. It's oddly charming and refreshing. There's just something so satisfying about reading about a vicious man-eating teenage girl. Also, the subtlety of the writing really sets this book apart from the other like horror young adult novels. The author also tries to use cannibalism as a metaphor, in my opinion, for too many things, made the metaphor less effective. There are a lot of food references in the book, so I think the main metaphor she uses for cannibalism is excessive meat consumption, because the author herself is a vegan, so I think excessive meat consumption is something that concerns her. I also did not enjoy the ending of this book. I felt like the ending was very rushed and abrupt, and it kind of changes your perspective on Marin completely. I don't want to give too many details away, but I did think that the ending was rushed and kind of changes your perspective on the entire book. And for that reason, I gave this book a 3.3 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I did think that it had its problems. Again, the rushed ending and the confusing metaphor were the main issues for me. That is the end of this video. I hope that you enjoyed it if you made it all the way to the end and found a book recommendation to add to your TBR list. If you made it this far, please leave me a book recommendation in the comment section below. I am looking for new books to read. So I'm gonna end this video here. My coffee is cold and I have class in an hour.